So good morning again. Good morning again, Quentin Dulus, Director of Green Healthy Buildings at the European Copper Institute. The Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, EPBD, sets the framework to achieve a zero-emission building stock. We will have 4 debates on the road to zero-emission buildings to explore different aspects. And we start today with the application of energy efficiency first. That's a good first topic. Next debates will address the importance of skills, the perspective of consumers, and the importance of buildings into the energy system. So more information is to come on our website. I just got the information from Martin that there is a first shadow meeting on this Friday, so it's a really timely moment to start these discussions with stakeholders. Zero-emission buildings will rely on renewable energy sources. District heating and electrification will clearly play a key role. The key principle to start with is energy efficiency first. How can we minimize energy needs and energy losses in buildings? Are we addressing all solutions? How to maximize the benefits? What's the right balance between energy efficiency and renewable supply? These are some of the questions we will discuss today in the context of a climate crisis, an energy crisis, and also the invasion of Ukraine by Russia that is putting the objective of energy independence at the forefront of the political discussion. So for this timely discussion, I'm glad to welcome MEP Morten Alvek Petersen from Renew Europe in Denmark. He's the EPBD Shadow Rapporteur for his group. He has been a very active member of the European Parliament since 2014 on various energy topics. He's also Vice Chair of the Industry Committee ITRE right now. And he already worked on the previous recast of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. You can see the evolution of this file. We also have Dr. Engineer Rainer Flüger, who is Associate Professor at the University of Innsbruck in the unit of Energy Efficient Buildings. He will give us a presentation with some academic input. Then we have Arena Vitali from the Coalition for Energy Savings. That's the voice of energy efficiency in Europe, gathering both civil societies and industries. Then we have Julien Dijol, Deputy Secretary General and Policy Director at Housing Europe, the Federation of Public, Cooperative and Social Housing. Its members manage about 11% of dwellings in Europe, so a very important sector for renovation. And finally, we have Bertrand Depré, Vice President, EU Government Affairs at Schneider Electric, a global leader in the energy transition, digital transformation, energy management, automation and electrification. So we have a great panel of speakers, but let's start now with a short presentation by Professor Rainer Flüger about energy efficiency first. He will particularly explore the potential of heat recovery on domestic hot water as an example of solution with significant potential that is still not really considered by policies and on which he published recently a study. So we will come back afterwards for our debate with all participants and the audience. I remind you that you can use the Q&A function to raise some questions. And Rainer, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Quentin, for the introduction and very warm welcome from my side from Innsbruck, Austria. Welcome to my presentation, Energy Efficiency First, High Efficient Buildings and the Key Role of Heat Recovery. Let me first quote Commission President Ursula von der Leyen from the press release of the 8th of March this year, and let's focus on these more energy efficiency. Energy efficiency makes us independent independent from Russian gas, but also independent from fossil fuels in general. So that's a really big issue. Energy efficiency first is also a campaign launched also by the IFA, by the International Passive House Association. If you are further interested, here's the link where you can find a lot of videos on these topics in international languages. What is the focus? So the delivered energy consumption in the residential sector is mostly space heating, 63%, and others like lighting, cooking, and so on, but also almost 50% water heating. So these two issues are where we have to focus on. Paving the road to zero-emission buildings is twofold: energy-efficient building envelope and domestic hot water, also household appliances. But energy-efficient building energy means we have to reduce the transmission losses. We have to reduce thermal bridges and improving the air tightness of the building envelope. And this not only for new buildings, but only for refurbishing for existing buildings. And we have to introduce ventilation heat recovery. This is also possible for existing buildings. How about domestic hot water? First of all, we have to reduce the distribution and storage losses. That's a big issue. And again, we can use heat recovery. Heat recovery on domestic hot water is a big lever to reduce energy consumption in the residential sector. And we have to remove the barriers for this wastewater heat recovery. Keep an eye on the sewage losses. Like ever, it's out of sight, out of mind. You know these infrared pictures where you can see clearly the transmission losses of walls, windows, roofs, and so on. But what's underground? You can't see it. So let's have a look underground. You have the sewage losses. If you don't have any heat recovery, the heat is released to the ground. I'm sitting at the moment in this building, actually here, if you can see my pointer. This is really an Enefit refurbished building, an office building from the 1970s. With a former heat demand of 180 kilowatt hours per square meter and year, and now after renovation in Enefit standard with a lower, with less consumption than 20 kilowatt hours per square meter and year. It works really good since several years now, and it works since 30 years in the first passive house in Darmstadt-Kranichstein in Germany. It's measured since many years now, and it has proven to have a lower final energy consumption for heating with less than 10 kilowatt hours per square meters and year. That's really measured data. That's not calculated, but really measured ones. And let's have a look on the energy balance of this building with a space heat demand of 12.5 kilowatt hours. We have some solar gains, we have internal gains, but we have losses. The losses are minimized. So by heat recovery with a heat recovery rate of 82%, around 12 kilowatt hours per square meter and year are recovered for ventilation. The transmission losses are reduced to a minimum by well insulation, by reducing the thermal bridges and so on. And last but not least, also the wastewater heat recovery can help to reduce the losses for wastewater for the to reduce the demand for heat for domestic hot water. I will present you some of the outcomes of our study from about wastewater heat recovery systems. One of the major authors is Pavel Sevela. He's also here if you have further questions further on. And Johannes Frenger and Jürgen Schnieders from Passive House Institute. We stated that wastewater heat recovery technology was identified as the most promising emerging technology for unlocking the under-addressed potential for reducing the energy need for water heating. How does it look like? If you never have seen it, it's a duct type for vertical application, a horizontal application for a shower drain, or an active application, which is also vertical. This is actively driven by pump, and these are driven by gravity. So we focus on the best possible hydraulic connection. How does it work? The heart, the core of the system is a counterflow heat exchanger, taking the heat in counterflow from the sewage water, from the bathtub or from the shower tap, and preheating the water for the heater and for the cold water for the mixture. This is the best way to do so. There are two other options which are less efficient for only preheating cold water or only preheating warm water. But let's focus on the highest possible efficiency preheating both. How high are the costs for the saved energy with this system in euros per kilowatt hour saved. This strongly depends on the climate. Why? Because the cold water in different countries is different. So coldest in Nordic climates and warmest in Mediterranean climate. The savings are highest in the Nordic climates. To give you a relation about the cost of energy in terms of heat by natural gas in the European average or electricity price, here the red dotted line, we see that in Nordic, Oceanic, and most of the continental, it's even lower than the average price for heat in terms of natural gas. Here, every European country with the different energy mix is listed in terms of saving of CO2 emissions and delivered energy. So the red dotted lines are the saved energy per device on the right-hand scale. And you see the colder countries have the highest savings. And you see, depending on the energy mix and the CO2 emission intensity of the different countries, you see the kilogram CO2 equivalent saved per year. One of the outcome of the total saving potential in the total EU was that if in the period between 22 and 2030, if every second renovated or newly constructed building in Europe were equipped with wastewater heat recovery system, a number of 35.7 terawatt hours less energy would have to be generated. So 6.6 megatons of CO2 equivalent could be saved. This is with the assumption of this renovation rate. But if you assume that all buildings, so the total current building stock would be equipped until 2030, you would end up with a consumption drop of 100 terawatt hours per year. With this amount, you could reach the goal for hot water with this technology only. So you see the huge potential if every building would be equipped with this system. Saving potentials in percentage is around 40% for hot water heating, including the system inefficiencies such as distribution and storage losses. So what are our suggestions for a European legal framework? First of all, intensive information campaign for customers, craftsmen, and industry is needed. Highly needed is training for professionals, as well as craftsmen, planners, and university training. And subsidies, especially in the first phase of this evolving technology, is important. And last but not least, the removal of legal and practical hurdles is important. A suggestion for an amendment for the EPBD Annex 6 would be to add the words and heat recovery characteristics in this section 4 to highlight also this new technology to be a huge lever for reducing the energy. Also, energy labeling could help. Energy labeling is already installed for heat recovery ventilation. You know, this SEG rating. Similar things could be done for wastewater heat recovery also. In 22, the wastewater heat recovery in combination with water heaters will be introduced to improve the energy label. That's a good steps. And yeah, last but not least, we have to remove the barriers of wastewater heat recovery. I think we should have a European-wide harmonized performance and hygiene test procedure for wastewater heat recovery systems to indicate their efficiency. The price should be reduced. This could be done by mass production in a European-wide scale. And there are some issues with the double wall construction, which is one of the reasons for higher costs and less efficiency. So exceptions for mandatory double wall constructions like in the Netherlands could help for this evolving technology. Professional know-how for application is important. So education is important. And last but not least, fail-safe installation by prefabrication of systems could help to avoid mistakes in mounting and engineering. Summary, all in a nutshell, the passive house principle for new buildings and refurbishment is a big step ahead, especially the NFIT standard for refurbishing is important in the next few years. The efficiency first principle in the building sector leads to reduction of heat losses from the envelope. Ventilation and domestic hot water heat recovery could help also, and heat losses from domestic hot water distribution system represents 30 to 50% of the delivered energy. So we should reduce these losses highly. So that's really important, as well as wastewater heat recovery, which can save about 40% of the total energy need for domestic hot water. If so, this technology helps to reduce the water heater device as well as the storage volume and the temperature. Yeah, so maybe in future it will be similar to the incandescent bulbs substituted by LED. Maybe in future this will be the standard and not a standard a shower without heat recovery. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainer. So now you can stop sharing your presentation, and I can invite all panelists to turn on their camera. So it was a very interesting presentation highlighting the importance of looking at all options to save energy. It's amazing to see that solutions are known since a long time, with the first passive house more than 30 years ago. But at the same time, we have simple solutions that look obvious when you explain it, but that are still not widely adopted because of some barriers. And one of these, as you highlighted, is that this solution of wastewater heat recovery is not considered into the calculation method defined into the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. So we can take it as an example to say that there is more potential for energy efficiency in building. So I'd like to ask to all the panelists whether there is any quick question to run from your side, quick clarification before we start the debate. If not, I will turn to Morten Petersen with a first very quick question on energy efficiency first. Do you think it is sufficiently considered into the EPBD and the Fit for 55 package?
So the short answer is obviously no. And I have to say that I've been somewhat surprised by the lack of emphasis on energy efficiency and what we've seen so far coming out of the Commission on Repower EU as such. And we tend to focus a lot on the generation side, on the electricity generation side, on renewables, on permitting, on PV, on offshore, on land, what have you. And for very good reasons, given that we lack green electricity. So surely it is an important issue and measure. But given what's happening now in Ukraine and the ambition of achieving independence in terms of gas imports, I think the entire efficiency side, the EPBD, the Energy Efficiency Directive, will have to gain new prominence in terms of policy priorities. So I'm somewhat jokingly saying that the EPBD should be renamed rather than the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. We ought to call it the European Putin Bashing Directive, because this is where we really have some instruments at hand that will have a short-term impact in terms of reducing our gas imports in the very near future. So I think there's so much to be said in favor of energy efficiency first principle on revising upwards the trajectory and ambitions and targets within the Energy Efficiency Directive, and for sure on the EPBD when we get to this, to ensure that we implement and enforce initiatives like the ones described here by Rainer. And I think on the wastewater heat recovery issues, it seems to me that it is in parallel or in conjunction with what we ought to be doing on the eco-labeling initiatives in general, because by shifting these targets, obviously this leads to reduced energy consumption, and again leading to a reduced necessity of importing gas from Putin. So I think it has so much merit to it. I fully buy into what was mentioned on the need for information campaigns, on the need for training. I think the need for harmonized performance criteria on issues like this are absolutely right, and I'm happy to take these points with me in the negotiations that will be starting very soon. So I think it is totally valid. Now, can I just add a couple of more points, Quentin, because I know my time is short, and apologies.
Sure, I wanted to ask you your other priorities for the file.
Sure.
So I think that's perfect if you continue. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we have, I mean, the obvious, one of the many obvious issues we have is switching from gas boilers to heat pumps, and we're currently facing a situation whereby I believe 20 out of 27 member states currently subsidize installation of gas boilers. And clearly this is out of historical reasons that transit away from coal into other energy carriers, but this cannot go on. And on an extremely sad background with developments in Ukraine and Putin's war there, clearly now is the time to ensure that we move away from this. We will have long discussions, obviously, on trigger points, when to renovate, on the long-term renovation strategies. We'll have discussions on the energy performance certificates and the specifics in this. EVs, the entire issue of charging infrastructure and the obvious role of buildings in this. Last time around, when revising the EPBD, time was not ripe at that point of time, 2, 3, 4 years ago. I think it is now. We need to discuss how to also install thermostats in order to be able to regulate room temperatures to a different extent that we've done hitherto, given that, again, and you've seen the estimates done by IEA, that by lowering room temperatures by just 1 degree, we would be able to save up to 6, 7, 8% of the current imports of Russian gas. So I say there are a lot of issues out there. We'll have the eternal discussions on subsidiarity, on whether to regulate this on a European level rather than member states doing it on their own. So this is a classic in all the negotiations we'll have, and for sure we'll be having this big discussion and argument this time around. But the background is different. The background is totally different given the terrible war in Ukraine, and I hope for my part that momentum is there in order to really have some pan-European solutions to this. Let me end here, Quentin. I have like a small 5-10 minutes, and I'm happy to take questions. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Arena, I guess you are pleased to hear this message for energy efficiency first. Can you remind the importance of it, and do you also think that there is more to do on this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And
I wanted to ask Arena. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Sorry for jumping in.
Yeah, well, basically, I couldn't agree more with what MEP Peterson has just said. And of course, I'd like to recall here that energy efficiency first in this context, in this new geopolitical context, is not an abstract concept anymore, but it's really a practical way to reduce fossil fuel imports from Russia and to provide a structural answer to the energy security challenge the EU is facing. In the practice, you already said, it means renovating our old inefficient EU building stock before creating new costly infrastructure to bring heat to our buildings, and heat that will be wasted anyway. I think in this context, and it has been already mentioned, the Fit for 55 package and the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive are crucial because those needs to give the long-term signal to business and investors that wasting energy in all sectors is not acceptable anymore, and that investing in energy efficiency is a EU priority for the short term, and we see the discussions that are happening under the Repower EU plan, but it's also a priority for the long term, and that's where really legislation can help. So I think totally agree with what mentioned. It's the moment now to really reinforce EED and EPBD and to prioritize ambition to ensure that energy savings become a joint priority and we stop focusing only on alternative solutions related to supply.
Thank you, Ariana. I wanted to also have a reaction of Julien, because at the end, for housing companies, energy efficiency, it's an investment, can be seen as a cost, and you have to find the right balance with the work on supply and on efficiency. What are your thoughts on this?
So yeah, totally. That's from the perspective of housing providers, we see actually we see the challenge of decarbonization as very related to three aspects. Which, by the way, are three aspects that the recent IPCC report on climate change has mentioned. The first aspect is indeed efficiency. That's quite clear. But we cannot just stop at that point, because what we have seen is that, for instance, very simply, the relationship between cost and benefits is not the same for all energy efficiency levels of buildings. I mean, there is clear evidence that in the higher ranges of EPC labels, the costs outweigh the benefits of energy renovations. And we have very interesting studies about that that we recently worked with Copenhagen Economics. So that there are clear limits to the energy efficiency aspect, just by the fact that if you are in the building sector, you know very well that the U value, so which basically tells you about the energy performance, ceases to decrease after a certain, let's say, thickness of insulation. So you cannot simply rely exclusively on that. And therefore, we need two other things. The second thing that we need is indeed the supply of decarbonized heats. And that's very crucial. In that case, the role of heat recovery is fundamental. And thirdly, but not the least important, we need what the IPCC call sufficiency policies. Sufficiency means basically that you avoid demand for new energy, for new infrastructure. So you have to put in place measures that we make sure that we basically size up the infrastructure in relation to the needs and the actual needs of people, and not more. So we need to find a sufficient infrastructure and equipment that will provide for necessary energy for the well-being of people, but not more. So that's sufficiency policies. And for the IPCC, sufficiency policy can make up to 10% of the contribution to CO2 reductions. And obviously efficiency makes the most of it, like apparently 42% according to the IPCC. But you need actually this combination of the three aspects: efficiency, renewable, and sufficiency policies, in order to reach full decarbonization by 2050, which is the goals that we have. And actually, in our sector, in the housing sector, particularly the social, corporate, and public housing sector, this is the approach that we are taking, looking at how we make the best approach in terms of renovation, combined with the greening of the heating system, in particular investing in district heating. District heating is a very good solution as long as it's actually provided by renewable energy, and actually the Energy Efficiency Directive will provide for the gradual greening of district heating. So that's very important. And on top of this combination of efficiency and supply of clean energy, we also work with tenants in order to adapt their behavior to the new buildings, renovated buildings they live in. And we clearly see that we need to do that, because the so-called rebound effect is not theoretical, it's a reality. We see that in the data, in the statistics. So we need to have this unique relationship with tenants, which is something that the social housing providers are doing, in order to explain with tenants how actually to better use their buildings to increase their comfort while maintaining their energy bills at a reasonable levels. And this is that's what we do, and we need a legal framework which allow for that. But maybe I will stop now.
Yeah, thank you, Julien, for this great input and example. I will ask a quick question to Bertrand, and then ask Martin to react to any of these points. Bertrand, we have seen one example of solution for energy efficiency where there is still unaddressed potential, but I wanted to ask you whether you see other solutions that are currently not enough on the focus for energy efficiency in buildings.
All right, thank you, Quentin. And okay, quick question, try to quick answer, but maybe just to start as the other speakers, I think energy efficiency first, that's a no-brainer. We all agree because that's a matter of cost, productivity, return on investment. Now, I think for me, there are four kind of caveats to put here. So it's energy efficiency first, but energy efficiency which deliver. And then I would really outline what Julien has been saying, which is monitoring, right? So we have really to understand first, what is the consumption in the buildings ex ante, and then to check that the investment deliver, right? And there have been too many investment in energy efficiency where there have been the rebound effect, or that we didn't really control enough the energy consumption in the building after the investment. And this is where, to address your point, Quentin, technical building system are so important, right? So your colleagues presented an example of that, which is linked to water management, but there are others, right? So like, let's say the electricity equipment, which you have in the buildings, at homes, they provide, such monitoring capabilities, so to know exactly what the consumption in the building is about. And those are not being qualified actually within the technical building system. So that's an example of things which are not value enough within the EPBD today. Then very quickly, because I understand Morten has to leave, energy efficiency first, but renewable electricity second, right? And I think, again, a lot of people have been saying, okay, renewable is important. And indeed, we really have to take the two together, right? So to have the kind of system efficiency, you look at where the efficiency is about, you understand ex ante and post ante, and you source your buildings with renewable electrification, because electrification is simply efficient, right? Look at a heat pump, it's more efficient by a factor of 4 compared to fossil fuel heating, right? So I think it's very important that we also focus and invest on end-use electrification. And again, this is why the TBS system are so important. And then just my last point, it's about digital, right? Which I think it's maybe more difficult to address as a technology, because they are everywhere. They are connected the different products. There are the platform that give you the information as end users. But I would say that's also very important that within the indicators, within the APC, the energy performance certificate, digital is also highlighted as an enabler. So yeah, there are things which are not recognized enough. They are really linked to the TBS. They are linked to the electrification issue, and they are really important issues to consider in the current reform.
Thank you, Bertrand. Martin, you still have a few minutes to react to all what you have heard. There was a lot of information there.
Yeah, just a couple of reflections. I fully take on board the point made on sufficiency, because I mean the challenge is obviously to optimize, I mean, obviously acknowledge that these systems are totally integrated and has to be so there is for sure sufficiency discussion, meaning that we should avoid over investing in some areas and having a systems perspective on what's ahead. I think the point made on district heating speaks for itself, given that this is how we should improve in terms of integrating renewables into our heating systems. Again, given that buildings is around 40% of the energy consumption in Europe at large. So clearly there's a big role for district heating in this, in order to ensure that we basically have this transition going that we all want to. So and let me just touch upon what Bertrand is saying on monitoring and digital issues, because clearly this is interlinked with all that we ought to be doing, and digital issues are at the heart of the energy efficiency measures that needs to be implemented, basically making us aware of, okay, so where's the energy going, and how to optimize our system. And I think it's also, I also want to take one step back in order to ensure that we have a difficult mapping exercise to do, mapping the say households in order to ensure that we focus our attention where the benefits are highest. And clearly, we do not have these data today, not least on a pan-European level. Some member states might have it on national level, but clearly we are still fighting with this monitoring concept, because we do not have the necessary data today to identify households all over Europe and doing this mapping exercise. And I think we have to try to get our heads around this in order to ensure that we concentrate our efforts where we get most bang for the buck, so to speak. So all this to say, I think we have it's a really interesting phase. Again, we have our first shadows meeting, a technical meeting on Friday, and we get this process up and running quite fast. And as you know, on the efficiency directive, it's already moving quite fast, and we'll be voting on this before summer. So on the efficiency issues at large, clearly things are moving, and we have to keep momentum. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin. We'll let you take your flight, but thank you for this consideration. I hope we can all support you as stakeholder in this process with ideas, etc. So we keep in touch.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you as well. And we continue the discussion now, also to get our input that we can give to Martin's team that is also listening now. Wanted to ask Ariana, Julien, Bertrand, also what you see as a key improvement area in the EPBD for energy efficiency first. Ariana, maybe first.
Yeah, and actually, I would like maybe very quickly to react on the discussion about energy efficiency first and decarbonization of sources. Of course, energy efficiency first does not mean energy efficiency only. Energy efficiency first, it's a principle that should be taken into account, not to avoid to consider demand-side solution, but it means that a joint planning of demand resources and supplies resources should be brought together. And that's, I think, where you can really exploit the synergies between efficiency and renewables, and renewables, especially in the building sector. So in that aspect, and linked to your question on EPBD, one key point, for example, to ensure that this happens is really to try to better coordinating the planning obligation. So we know that we have building renovation plans that have been proposed by the Commission in the recast EPBD, so replacing the long-term renovation strategies that aims at achieving zero-emission buildings by 2050. Those are crucial, needs to be maintained, needs to be reinforced. Ideally, to ensure that there is this joint planning, those planning should come in coordination with the comprehensive heating and cooling assessments that are done under the Energy Efficiency Directive, particularly to ensure that demand-side solution and heating and cooling can be planned together in order to maximize opportunities. That's a way, I would say, to ensure that this planning happens in the right way. At the building level, I think to improve the energy performance of buildings directive, there are many opportunities. One quickly that goes a bit on the same direction is really to reinforce the building renovation passport. The building renovation passport as a tool can really help homeowners to decide what are their best way, what are their trajectories to achieve high energy performance of buildings. So reinforcing those tools to clearly give a step-by-step approach to homeowners, depending on their local conditions, depending on their type of building, can also allow to improve energy efficiency first, and also grasp the synergy with supply. And finally, another area that we really see as crucial in terms of reinforcing the EPBD is reinforcing the provision of minimum energy performance standards. Of course, minimum energy performance standards needs to be set in combination with a supportive enabling framework that helps consumers and homeowners to renovate, both at the technical level and at a financial level. Improving this provision means mainly extend it not to cover residential and public buildings only, but all building segments, including commercial buildings. It also means ensuring that those buildings are not renovated at the low level of performance, like level E in the energy performance certificate, as suggested by the Commission, but to higher levels, or at very least to ensure that there is a clear timeline for those buildings, to be renovated at higher level. So those are a few improvements that we would be suggesting, and of course there are much more. And I'll stop here to
thank you, Arianna. Maybe Julien, maybe you have some reactions to this or to other points on priorities for the EPBD.
I think, yeah, I mean, what I mentioned at the beginning as for us, this triple approach, efficiency, renewable and sufficiency, obviously this is promoted and supported by an overall legislative framework. So it's not only the EPBD, but also the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Renewable Energy Directive, and also you may add to that the question on financing with the ETS for building and transport if there's something like this happen. So the EPBD itself has a very interesting aspect, which is the building renovation, the action plan, building action plan, which actually are basically replacing the long-term renovation strategies. And as we said, I mean, and I agree with Arianna, we need this planning aspect. So we need to urge member states to really think carefully about what are the energy sources that are available in one particular area, so that when we do renovation, district renovation, we really think about decarbonization of heat as well. And the building action plans are probably a good tool, as long as they are not simply administrative exercise and burdensome exercise for the governments. So we need the ownership by the local level, by the regional authorities, so that they can really think in terms of renovation strategies and heat maps and stuff like that. I mean, things are already happening. If you discuss with municipalities, they all know how to basically go forward in terms of decarbonization. But we probably need something at the national level that will give a clear view of where we go. But then we also need to get rid of the potential obstacles. And I think we have this presentation earlier by Rainer, and so he explained also that for the heat recovery aspect, there might be some obstacles, but for renovation, we also might find some obstacles in the EPBD. One of them can potentially be the rescaling of the EPC. It's a bit long to explain, but to make it short, rescaling, recalibration of the EPC means that the label classification that are now used in many countries will have to be adjusted by 2026, which means that buildings might receive a different energy label classification after the harmonization. And when you are in the renovation business, you know how difficult this kind of thing can be. When rules of the game change, when there's ambiguity about whether or not your buildings will be classified in that or those letters. So yeah, this is typically the kind of things that can be actually an obstacle that can actually hamper and slow down a bit renovation. So we are not in favor of recalibration or rescaling of the EPC, because it might be something which again, ambiguity, administrative costs, slowing down the renovation process. So we have to find a way to allow for renovation and building decarbonization to happen right now and not waiting 2026. So this is typically the kind of thing that we are looking at, but overall the EPBD has a good balance between regulation and obligation on the one hand, and incentivize on the other hand, particularly related to, as I said, to the decarbonization of heat. So that should be also in conjunction with other directives, as I mentioned earlier. So that's what I would like to say.
Thank you. Julien, a lot of elements again, and you mentioned the question of support and subsidies, and we have a question from the audience about the need to subsidize if the payback is already very acceptable. So that can be an important question, and maybe also to Rainer, because it's something you suggested. You showed that the payback on this particular solution, wastewater recovery, is interesting, but you encourage to have subsidies for it. So maybe you want to take this question, Rainer.
Yeah, from my point of view, subsidies should be limited to renovation actions which are really deep renovation. So renovation itself is already good in an economic point of view. So if you give subsidies, please only give subsidies for really deep renovation. This is important because otherwise we get into some kind of lock-in effect. If we refurbish buildings in a bad manner, which is only half the way, then people will not redo the work within the next decades. Then we have this lock-in effect. So refurbishing always is most economically feasible in those moments where anything has to be repaired anyhow. For example, the roof or the window or whatever. In this moment, do the best you can. And this refers to Julien, who said, well, how about the economics, thick insulation or expensive windows or so on? Well, they are economically feasible if the moment has come to take the old part out and have a new part in, thicker insulation, roof, windows, whatever. In this moment, in this very moment, the economy is very good. And if you want to spend subsidies, please do it on the highest efficiency level available at the moment, not for reverse. It's not about doing much and on a broad level in a fast speed, but do it in the best way. So when the moment has come to put out the old one, or window or roof or whatever, do it in the best way, in the best insulated way, and then it's economically feasible. Yeah.
Thank you, Rainer. I see another question that might be to you. Do you think education on also maybe more aware about energy?
Yes, that's really important. I'm in University of Innsbruck and we do teaching for university students, but we need education in all levels from craftsmen up to university planners and all those. I think this is a really bottleneck. So industry will come up with products very fast. So to scale up all these technologies we talked about today can be rather fast from industry side, but from the education side, it takes some time and we have to start now. We already started, but it has to be intensified and really those schooling, this education processes should be intensified, and to spend money there is a good investment to speed up the process of energy efficiency in Europe.
Thank you, Rainer. Then I see a next question that is related to minimum energy performance standards. Looking first at the poorest performing building stock is important, but Jaap Ogeling, one participant, said that the proposed requirement to improve class F and E by 2023 is now. Bertrand, Julien, do you have a view on this?
Sorry, the connection. Can you hear me okay? Because I have some trouble with the connection.
I had also some problem when you spoke,
right.
So I didn't hear your question.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, your question was about MEPS, I suppose, Quentin.
Yeah, maybe the ambition of MEPS. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe very quickly on actually just one thing back to what Morten was saying about monitoring. Let me insist a little bit on that point, because I think, so your question was, is energy efficiency first good? Of course it's good, but again, it's really about also having a slightly differentiated approach depending on the buildings. This is something maybe that have not been highlighted as much as we should, from my point of view, in the sense that all what in the prescription doesn't work for all buildings, right? So you really have to have a tailor-made approach. And typically, when first we conceive the issue about smart meter to actually monitor the consumption of the buildings, then we didn't really, or at least the rules didn't take into account the fact that if you really want to understand how it works and how people are consuming energy, you need to be much more related to every energy usage, right? So what I'm saying is that monitoring can only work if you apply it zone by zone, even room by room, right? So smart meter as such cannot really address this issue, right? And this is the reason why the EPBD revision is important, because I think we need really to highlight the importance of having a monitoring functionalities within the technical building system. So let me remake this point again. And back to your question about MEPS, I think we need to speed up indeed. I think, it's, I think the whole timeline is good. It's already going to be challenging to get it through member state. That being said, typically for non-residential buildings where the energy efficiency potential is quite high, you surely can go a bit faster, right? But first, I would say, the first battle is really to keep what the Commission has been proposing, because I think it's already good. If we could speed up a little bit, great. Maybe look at non-residential buildings. But I think again, the fight is really to keep what we have, because overall the EPBD proposal from the Commission, I think we could all say, at least I could say, is pretty good on that point. Then, if I may just, sorry, on the subsidy question, I think that's a very important question as well, because I think it's important that we don't give subsidy to one particular, two particular, three particular technologies, but again, that we take, let's say, a kind of sufficiency or system efficiency approach, looking at, what is the best plan to renovate your buildings and then help the end user when they need to invest, right? Instead of saying, okay, this technology has to be heavily subsidized. That's not easy to realize in practice, but I think this is a quite important distinction to make.
Yeah, on this point, I would also just say that subsidies should be used and targeted to the most vulnerable population. Of course, energy efficiency payback, but there are certain parts of the population that cannot afford to pay at the beginning. So I guess as well, also together with taking into consideration the depth of the renovation, the subsidies should be directed to help the most vulnerable, to ensure that they are not left out from the energy transition. So I think that's an important point to make.
Yeah, great.
Thank you, Arena. Julien, do you want to add something on this point?
Yeah, I think yeah, no. I mean, about minimum energy performance standards. I mean, obviously, getting rid of the most energy consuming part of the stock is something that, first of all, is social housing providers are doing for a long time, for the reason that it's a good way to reach social justice and environmental performance at the same time. So that's something that we really see as fitting in terms of policies. But sometimes people, I think, are a bit confused, and they think that, okay, minimum energy performance standards, that's the only thing that will drive renovation. But actually, this is one aspect of the directive. The other aspects are pushing for deep renovation on the one hand. They're also pushing for member states to have energy efficiency requirements for renovation using the cost optimal methodology. So member states will not only put in place MEPs, which in a way is a way to ensure a decent housing, but it will also put in place regulation that will provide for instance, at least 30 or 40% of energy savings if you do renovation, all types of regulations and standards that will provide for renovation in general. So MEPS is not the alpha and omega of EPBD, and sometimes I feel we focus a lot on that, while it's only part of policies which are actually already in place in some countries already. So yeah, there's nothing really controversial about that, as long as we also work on the other aspect, because as said, focusing on the worst performing segment makes sense in terms of social justice, but obviously in terms of housing providers, we have also to focus on the other aspect, not the worst performing segment, but how to improve EPC, let's say D to go to B or A. That's also something which we need to do and challenging. So yeah, we need to think about how we put the money and what's the best way to distribute our financial means.
Thank you, Julien. There are still several questions that we will not be able to address because time is running. There is also a comment about the importance of electrical installations where there are energy losses that can be avoided as well there. But I think it's something that, Bertrand, you mentioned, that they should be considered as technical building system. Now, I just would like to ask all of you to give a very short final statement, final conclusion, final message. And I will start with Rainer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. And yeah, the message as in my presentation, efficiency first, holds for new buildings as well, and importantly for refurbishing. And for my opinion, the national buildings codes are not good enough up to now. So there is still a lack of efficiency, and people don't understand that these minimum requirements are only minimum legal requirements. They are not the economic and ecological optimum, and they can and should do more, and this should be highlighted. So I think on a national basis, we can and should do more, and as I said, give subsidies, but for really good quality and deep refurbishing. Thank you.
So go beyond the minimum. Ariana, final statement.
Yeah, I would maybe very shortly focus again on the importance of the regulatory framework. We have now really the opportunity to revise in the right way the Energy Efficiency Directive and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. We have been revised already this directive 4 years ago and also very recently. I mean, we cannot keep changing legislation each 3-4 times. It's also problematic for the implementation at the national level. So let's make it right this time. The potential for energy savings is clear in the building sectors and in the other sector. So let's just be brave and do it well once for all, and let's not revise it again in 3 years from now because we realize that we were not ambitious enough. So please.
Now we need to do it. Julien, final words.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, as Ariana said, we need regulatory stability because we are providers. I mean, operators and doing the work. So regulatory stability and visibility is key, and at the same time, flexibility in how the different regions, municipalities can implement their decarbonization strategies. So it's very important to have the combination of stability and flexibility.
Thank you. Bertrand, final word?
Yeah, no, fully agree. I mean, we need the European market for renovation. We need barely this EPBD revision that need to be ambitious with energy efficiency first and renewable electrification second. Let me I think one point is about energy efficiency first. We need to convince to empower end users, consumers, right? And that's why I think we really need to review the EPC, the certificate, which is the main channel of information and their involvement from end users. And there are also some good ideas in the EPBD. And I think that's very important because if we want to win the energy efficiency first battle, then it needs to be driven by the end users. So let's also look at that dimension.
Thank you, Bertrand. Very important point. I think we have discussed a lot of points today to make sure that energy efficiency first is delivered, the need to look at all technical building systems, to look at data, the question of sufficiency, the importance of long-term planning, avoiding lock-in effects, looking at educations, and ensuring stability of the framework. We have a key opportunity now with the EPBD recast, and we must do it right now to really accelerate the renovation wave. So thank you everyone for your participation. I would like to add information about the next debate we will have. We will debate about skills with MEP Sean Kelly in 2 weeks on May 10. Then we will have with MEP Karen Cuff, the rapporteur on the EPBD, discussion about the role of buildings into the energy systems, end of May on the 31st. And Bertrand mentioned the importance of consumers. This will be the topic of our final debate, for which we will announce the date in June in due time. You will have all info on this on our website on copperalliance.org/events/EPBD, but you will find also all of this into an email that you will receive in the coming days, with also the link to the recording and to the presentation of today. So thank you everyone for your participation. I'm sorry that we could not take all questions. There were a lot of participants today, and I hope to see you also in our next EPBD debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.